This is the new 15-inch M2 MacBook Air, and although this has to be one of my favorite laptop releases of recent memory, there are a few important caveats. Firstly, this has never been done before. While there were originally two sizes of the MacBook Air, an 11-inch and a 13-inch, Apple's never dabbled in increasing the display size since it was announced in 2008. Though I'm glad that they did, especially considering how powerful these machines with Apple's silicon have become. It's now created a space in the market which didn't exist previously with Apple, offering a cheaper laptop with a large footprint to get real work done, without having to pay the Apple tax to get the Pro model. I've always been fascinated by devices like the Dell XPS machines and even the larger LG Grams because of how thin and light they were while still providing enough power for creative workflows. Though when it comes to Apple, the only way to get a similar size display previously was by purchasing the 16-inch M1 Pro or M2 Pro MacBook Pros, which not only weigh more, but they're a lot thicker and they're considerably more expensive, which is why I think the 15-inch M2 MacBook Air has a reason to exist. Anyways, before we get into it, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. I can't believe you guys allowed me to surpass 20,000 subscribers. Like, what are you doing? I seriously appreciate all the support. It truly does mean the world, and just thank you so much. Now that that's out of the way, when we open it up, we're greeted with obviously the most important thing, the 15.3-inch 500-nit liquid retina display. And just like my favorite thin and light, the 13-inch M2 MacBook Air, it's beautiful with a resolution of 2880 by 1864, giving you the exact same 224 pixels per inch as its little brother. Text is very crisp with great color accuracy, making everything you do on it just feel great. I have no complaints with the display, and that's including its massive diseased growth growing out from the top of the screen. Though the notch isn't really a problem, and while it may be off-putting to some, it's really not something that you notice or pay attention to while you're using the machine. Just like the previous Air and the Pros, it sits in the finder bar and it's never really blocking any of the content that you have displayed. If this is holding you back from committing to this machine, I suggest just purchasing it from a place that has a pretty respectable return policy so you can try it for yourself. Because honestly, I promise you, you will forget that it exists. Going down to the keyboard deck though, it's odd. I really don't know how else to put it, but it just looks really weird. Not in a bad way, but I guess because I've used the 16-inch Pro and have gotten used to seeing speaker grills on either side of the laptop, it just makes this feel really empty. But that's where the complaints with the keyboard deck end, in all honesty. Not only do you get the same fantastic keyboard layout that you do on the 13-inch Air with the full-size function row, Touch ID, and tactile keys with great travel, but you also get a large trackpad, and of course it's fantastic. It just makes navigating the larger display really nice, and everything about using this laptop just feels really natural. There's also virtually no keyboard flex, no chassis flex, and no creaking or anything of that sort. It's really just built to last, and it feels very premium. Since we're talking about what's new though, there is also a new speaker layout. Of course, they're hidden away under the keyboard and display hinge, but instead of 4 speakers, there's 6. This is really nice to see, and for me, I feel like it adds a little more depth to what I'm listening to in terms of low-end response, and I think that it makes a really big difference compared to the 13-inch Air. It's not something that I would have expected, especially considering there's no real reason to do this, as they could have essentially just price gouged everyone and called it a day. But I'm not going to complain about having better audio on a device that I feel is more suitable for content consumption due to its larger size. Another thing that's different, well, on a technicality, is the battery. It's a larger cell, both physically and in capacity. However, it doesn't actually play a part in the laptop's lifespan, boasting the same 18 hours of battery life as its little brother. This does make sense though. A larger display equals more power, and it just basically equals out. It's kind of hard for me to sit here and complain about the fact the larger 15-inch doesn't have a longer lifespan than the 13, but that's just unreasonable considering that 18 hours is already plenty to get you through a busy workday or whatever you plan to do on this machine. I personally don't see myself charging this any more than once or twice a week if I'm being realistic, And if you're a student, for example, who plans to use it every day for classes and assignments, you may be charging it every other day. Apple's really come so far when it comes to efficiency and performance per watt on their own silicon, and it's honestly just a really great time to be a consumer in this market right now. There are a few more things that I really want to get and just burst out here rapid fire before I start talking about whether or not you should consider this machine though. Size, obviously being 15 inches, it's a large laptop. Here's it beside the M1 Air. You can see that while the display may only be a couple inches larger, the actual physical dimensions of the laptop have increased by about 26%. I don't have the M2 Air on me at the moment, but it's a very, very similar comparison. So this is just something to keep in mind if you're working with limited room in your workspace, or perhaps have a smaller backpack. Whilst this is the Air, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily small. Though where it makes up for this is in two other dimensions, size and weight. I won't lie, I was shocked when I took this out of the box and realized that yes, this is quite literally just a larger MacBook Air. It's 11.5 millimeters thin as opposed to 11.3 on the 13 inch, which is so minute that I wouldn't even be able to tell the difference. And despite it being much larger, it only weighs half a pound more, bringing the weight from 2.7 pounds to 3.3. All in all, these are very welcome, and I guess it wouldn't be called an Air without keeping these dimensions in mind, but it's kind of ridiculous seeing it in person. On one hand, it looks like the 16-inch Pro, but from any slight angle, it looks razor thin. Everything else about the laptop though is the same. The same Thunderbolt 4 ports, the same headphone jack, the same specs, and the same MagSafe connector. Though you actually do get the upgraded 35 watt dual charger in the box instead of the base 30 watt, which is really weird because that was an extra like $35 charge here in Canada for the M2 Air. So it's really cool that they're just including this and not really saying anything about it. Though when it comes to pricing of this laptop, it's kind of a mixed bag, and I think this is where it's really going to kill it for some of you watching. The 15-inch MacBook Air costs $1299, and the 13-inch now costs $1099 from the previous $1,200 price tag. So if all you care about is performance, battery life, build quality, and essentially everything that makes this laptop tick, going with the 13-inch is a great option. My problem with the pricing on the 15-inch though is that if you're paying for the 16 gigabytes of unified memory and the 512 gigs of storage option, it brings the total up to $1,700 US. And for that price, it almost makes this feel like a stopgap product, leaning you toward the Pro option for $300 more, which at its baseline gives you that 512 gig SSD, 16 gigs of unified memory, a ProMotion display, better external display support, but more importantly, the faster M2 Pro. In fact, you can actually buy the M1 Pro 14-inch or 16-inch for under $1,700 US if you look hard enough, and you're going to be getting a better display and everything else that I mentioned, with the only caveat being that you're getting the M1 Pro instead of the M2 Pro, but it is still an upgrade over the base M2. Though I can sit here and nitpick about this all day. These pricing strategies are done on purpose to edge people closer and closer to spending their absolute limit and make them think they're getting possibly the best that they can. But if there's anything we've learned with Apple Silicon, it's really not all that important. I'm gonna close this video out and say this. The 15-inch MacBook Air is an incredible laptop, and it's one that I didn't know that I needed in my life. I bought this with the intent to cover it for a few videos and later down the line potentially sell it, but now it's not leaving my hands because it genuinely filled a gap that I've been looking for a very, very long time. This is the laptop that I've been waiting for, the one that makes the most sense for me, and I'm glad Apple took a risk and delivered us something out of the ordinary for once. Anyways, I'll see you all in the next one. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, drop a sub, or don't. I don't really care. Peace out.